I was standing in the middle of my daughter's wedding reception when my husband of 8 years stood up, took the maid of honor's hand, and told 200 guests he was in love with her. My champagne glass slipped from my fingers. I don't remember it hitting the floor. I just remember the sound, that sharp crack of glass against marble, and then silence. 200 people and not a single breath. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 44 years old. I'm a program director at a youth education nonprofit in Atlanta, and the woman my husband chose over me on my daughter's wedding day in front of every person we knew was the woman I called my best friend for over 15 years. He thought that was his moment of triumph. He had no idea it was the last moment he'd ever feel powerful. Because what he didn't know was that my 72-year-old father was about to rise from his chair, and what my father had been carrying in the inside pocket of his suit jacket for the past 6 months was about to turn Vincent's little victory speech into the worst night of his life. If you're watching this, drop where you're from and what time it is right now. And subscribe, because what my father did next made a grown man's face turn white as a sheet. You don't want to miss this. Now let me take you back 9 years to a warm September evening that I thought was the start of my second chance at love. 9 years ago, I was 35 years old and convinced that love had already used me up and spit me out. My first husband, Terrence, left when Zora was 5. No warning, no fight, just a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I can't do this anymore." I came home from work, read those 6 words, and spent the next 3 hours sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator, listening to my daughter sing to herself in the next room, not knowing her daddy was never coming back. That was the first time my heart broke. But I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I had a little girl who needed breakfast in the morning and a bedtime story at night. So I picked myself up. I went back to work the next day. I cried in the bathroom at lunch, fixed my face, and kept going. That's what we do. That's what my mama taught me before she passed, and that's what her mama taught her. My father, Hector Beaumont Carter, was my rock through all of it. Daddy was 72 now, but back then, he was in his early 60s and still sharp as a blade. He'd built his life from nothing, started with one laundromat on Cleveland Avenue in southwest Atlanta back in 1981, and over 30 years, turned it into a small chain of laundromats and 3 rental properties. Nothing flashy. Nothing extravagant, but solid, steady. Everything my father touched was built to last, including the house on Cascade Road. That house. Lord, that house meant everything to our family. My grandfather, Walter Carter, bought the land in 1964 when black folks could barely get a mortgage in this city. He built that house with his own hands, brick by brick, and raised my father in it. When Grandpa Walter passed, the house went to Daddy, and Daddy always said the same thing.
"This house isn't mine, Niecy. It belongs to every Carter who comes after me. It's your inheritance, yours and Zora's. Don't ever let anyone take it from you."
I used to nod and smile when he said that, thinking he was just being sentimental. I had no idea he was giving me a warning. After Terrence left, I moved back into the Cascade Road house with Zora. Daddy insisted. He was living in a smaller condo in College Park. By then said the big house was too much for just him. But I think he wanted me close, wanted to make sure his grandbaby had a stable home. Those years, just me, Zora, and my work were hard but good. I climbed from case manager to program director at the Carter Youth Initiative. Yes, same last name, no relation to the organization's founder, though Daddy always joked that it was destiny. I had my routines. Saturday mornings, Zora and I made pancakes and watched cartoons, even when she got too old for cartoons, and just did it to make me happy. Sunday afternoons, Daddy came over for dinner. He'd sit on the porch with his sweet tea watch. Zora ride her bike up and down the sidewalk and tell me stories about Mama. Those Sundays kept me alive. I wasn't looking for love. I want to make that very clear. I was not out there searching for a man to complete me. I had my daughter, my father, my career, and my home. I was whole. But then Vincent Delaney walked into my life, and I thought God was finally giving me what I deserved. It was a warm September evening, 2015. The Youth Initiative was hosting its annual fundraiser gala at the Biltmore Hotel in Midtown. I was in a navy blue dress that my girlfriend Pamela had talked me into buying because she said I needed to stop dressing like somebody's auntie. I was standing by the silent auction table checking my phone when I heard a voice behind me.
Excuse me, but I think you just outbid me on that weekend in Savannah.
I turned around and there he was. Vincent Delaney. Tall, 6 feet, 2 broad shoulders, clean-shaved smile that could light up a room. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him like it was sewn onto his body. He was 40 at the time, a commercial real estate manager with his own small firm. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. We talked for 2 hours that night. He asked about my work and actually listened. He laughed at my jokes. He didn't flinch when I mentioned I had a daughter. In fact, his eyes lit up.
I love kids,
he said.
Always wanted a family of my own, but life had other plans. How old is she?
14, going on 30. I said, and he laughed, like that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. By the end of the night, he'd gotten my number and I'd gotten butterflies I hadn't felt since I was 22 years old. The courtship was everything. Vincent was patient. He didn't rush anything. He waited 3 months before I let him meet Zora, and when he did, he brought her a first edition copy of Brown Girl Dreaming, because I'd mentioned once, just once, that she loved Jacqueline Woodson. Zora's face lit up, and mine did too. He won over my friends. He won over my coworkers. He even won over Raylene Foster, my best friend since Spelman College, who was notoriously skeptical of every man I'd ever dated.
Nisi, this one might actually be worth keeping.
Raylene told me one night over wine at her apartment in Buckhead.
Don't mess this up, girl.
She clinked her glass against mine and grinned. If only I had known what those words really meant coming from her mouth. The only person who didn't fall for Vincent's charm was my father. When I brought Vincent to Sunday dinner for the first time, Daddy was polite, shook his hand, asked about his business, listened quietly. But afterward, when Vincent went to the bathroom, Daddy pulled me into the kitchen.
I hope he's worth your trust, baby girl,
he said. No smile, no warmth in his eyes, just that steady, unblinking gaze that told me he'd already started measuring this man. Daddy, you don't even know him yet, I said, laughing it off.
I know enough.
He picked up his sweet tea and walked back to the porch. That was it. No argument, no lecture. Just 5 words that I brushed aside like dust. Looking back, I should have listened to my father, because the man I married wasn't the man I thought he was, not even close. And the friend who told me not to mess it up, she was already planning to take everything I had. Vincent and I got married in June of 2016, 9 months after that night at the Biltmore. Some people said it was too fast. My father said nothing at all, which was louder than any objection he could have made. But I was in love. The kind of love that makes you deaf to every warning bell ringing in your ears. The wedding was small, just 60 guests at a vineyard outside of Dahlonega in the North Georgia mountains. Raylene was my maid of honor. She planned the bridal shower, picked out the flowers, even helped me choose my dress. She stood next to me at the altar with tears in her eyes, and I remember thinking I am so blessed to have a friend like her. That memory makes me sick to my stomach now. The first 3 years of our marriage were beautiful, at least that's what I believed. Vincent moved into the Cascade Road house, and he treated it with what I thought was reverence. He fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that Daddy had been meaning to get to for years. He painted the shutters. He mowed the lawn every Saturday morning and waved at the neighbors like he'd lived there his whole life. But the thing about Vincent was he wasn't just moving into a house. He was moving into a legacy. And I was too blinded by gratitude to see the difference between a man who loves your home and a man who wants to own it. With Zora, he was incredible, or at least he performed incredible. He helped her with college applications. He drove her to campus visits at Howard Spelman and Clark Atlanta. When she got accepted to Spelman, he picked her up and spun her around the living room, and I stood there in the doorway with my hand over my heart, thinking this is what she deserved. A father figure who showed up. Daddy watched all of this from his usual spot on the porch. He never criticized, never interfered, but I noticed he started coming to Sunday dinner less often. When I asked why, he just said,
You've got a full house now, Nisi. I don't want to be in the way.
Daddy, you're never in the way.
Just make sure that house stays in your name, baby girl. Promise me that.
He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course it's in my name, Daddy. Why would you even say that? He didn't answer, just sipped his tea and looked out at the street. I should have pressed him. I should have asked what he knew. But I didn't because I was living inside a fairy tale and I wasn't ready to hear the wolf was already at the door. Around year 3, Vincent started talking about finances differently. He'd always been generous, paid for dinners, surprised me with weekend trips to Savannah and Hilton Head. But now he started saying things like,
Let me handle the bills, baby. You've got enough on your plate with work and Zora.
It sounded caring. It felt like partnership. So I agreed. I gave him access to the joint account we'd set up after the wedding. I let him manage the mortgage payments, the utilities, the insurance. He even offered to handle the property tax on the Cascade Road house.
I want to take care of everything for you,
he said one night, kissing my forehead.
You deserve to not worry about any of this.
Within 6 months, I realized I no longer had the login for our joint bank account. When I asked Vincent for it, he said he'd changed it for security purposes and would text it to me. He never did. When I asked again a week later, he got irritated.
Denise, do you not trust me? I'm handling it. Why do you need to check every little thing?
That was the first time his voice had that edge. Not yelling, not aggressive, just sharp enough to make me flinch, sharp enough to make me drop the subject. And that's exactly what he wanted. Around the same time, Vincent's phone started behaving differently. He used to leave it on the kitchen counter while he cooked, screen up, not a care in the world. Now it was always face down, always on silent. And he started taking calls in the garage, closing the door behind him, speaking low.
Work stuff?
He'd say when he came back in.
Client in Buckhead is being difficult.
I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me a reason not to. But my body knew something my mind refused to accept. I started waking up at 3 a.m, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. I'd roll over and watch Vincent sleeping peaceful as a baby, and I'd whisper to myself, "You're being paranoid, Denise. Your first marriage broke you. Don't let that brokenness ruin this one." Raylene echoed that exact sentiment whenever I confided in her. She and I had lunch every other Wednesday at this little soul food place on Peachtree called Mama Jean's. I'd pick at my catfish and tell her about the phone calls, the locked accounts, the feeling in my gut.
Girl, stop.
Raylene would say, waving her fork at me.
Vincent is one of the good ones. You know how rare that is? Don't push that man away because Terrence messed you up.
She always brought up Terrence, always reminded me of my failure. I thought she was being honest, being a real friend. Tough love. Now I know she was keeping me blind on purpose. One evening in October of 2019, I was cleaning out the coat closet when I found a receipt in the pocket of Vincent's blazer. Le Bilboquet, a French restaurant in Buckhead. Dinner for 2, $312. The date on the receipt was a Tuesday night. The same Tuesday, Vincent had told me he was at a late meeting with a property developer. My hands went cold. I stood there in the hallway holding that little slip of paper, and I felt my chest tighten like someone was pressing down on my ribs. There could be a reasonable explanation, I told myself. A business dinner? A client meeting at a nice restaurant? That happens. That's normal. I put the receipt back in his pocket. I closed the closet door, and I went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there with my eyes open, listening to Vincent breathe beside me. And for the first time in our marriage, the sound didn't comfort me. It made my skin crawl. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my first marriage had made me see threats where there were none. But my body knew the truth before my mind would accept it. I started waking up every single night after that heart slamming against my chest, drenched in sweat, and I didn't know why. Actually, that's not true. I knew exactly why. I just wasn't ready to face it. But the truth doesn't care if you're ready. It comes for you anyway. In January of 2020, Zora called me from Spelman screaming with joy. Marcus Webb, her boyfriend of 2 years, had proposed. My baby girl was getting married. I cried happy tears for 20 minutes straight. Zora was 22, about to graduate with honors, engaged to a software engineer who adored her. Marcus was from a good family in Charlotte. Quiet, respectful, the kind of man who stood up when a woman entered the room. I couldn't have picked better for her if I'd tried. Vincent seemed thrilled too. He hugged Zora when she came home to show us the ring, lifted her off the ground, and said,
I always knew Marcus was the one for you, baby girl.
Baby girl, that was my father's name for me. Hearing Vincent use it for Zora made something twist in my stomach, but I pushed it down. He's her stepfather, I told myself. He's allowed to love her. The wedding was set for October of 2020, but the pandemic pushed everything back. We finally locked in a new date, June of 2022, at the Foxhall Resort outside of Atlanta. 200 guests, garden ceremony, indoor reception, the whole dream. I threw myself into planning. Zora wanted her wedding to be elegant but warm, and I was determined to give her everything I never had. I started a dedicated savings account for the wedding the day she got engaged and put away $800 a month for over 2 years. By the time we were 6 months out, there was just over $19,000 in that account. Every penny earned by me. Every penny meant for my daughter. Raylene, of course, was involved in everything. Zora asked her to be one of the bridesmaids, but I suggested she be maid of honor. Raylene had been there for every milestone. She'd been at Zora's high school graduation, her Spelman acceptance party, her engagement dinner. She was family.
Nisi, are you serious?
Raylene said when I told her, pressing her hand to her chest.
I would be so honored. I love that girl like she's my own.
Like she's my own. That phrase hit differently now. The trouble started in January of 2022, 5 months before the wedding. I was sitting in the living room one Saturday afternoon while Vincent was in the shower. His iPad was on the coffee table and a notification popped up on the screen. I wasn't snooping, I want to be clear about that. I was reaching for the remote and the screen lit up with a message preview. It was an iMessage from a number with no contact name saved. The preview showed just enough to stop my heart. Last night was perfect. I can still feel you. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. My vision blurred. I could hear the shower running upstairs, hear Vincent humming some song like he didn't have a care in the world. I picked up the iPad with shaking hands and tried to open the message, but it was locked. I didn't know the passcode. I never needed it before. I sat there for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall tick by each second louder than the last. When Vincent came downstairs, his hair still damp, smelling like sandalwood, I was sitting in the exact same spot.
Everything okay?
He asked, toweling off his neck. Who's texting you from an unsaved number? His hand stopped moving, just for a second, a fraction of a second, but I saw it.
What are you talking about?
Your iPad lit up. There was a message. He crossed the room, picked up the iPad, glanced at it, and laughed. Actually laughed.
That's a work contact, Denise, a female client I'm showing properties to. She's from out of town and she's being a little too friendly. I've been meaning to set boundaries.
The message said last night was perfect.
She was talking about the property showing. We closed a deal. She was happy. That's it.
His jaw tightened. I stared at him. He stared back. And then his voice dropped. Not louder, lower, which was worse.
Are you going through my things now? Is that what we're doing? Because I gotta be honest, Denise, this is exactly the kind of thing that pushed Terrence away. You suffocate people. You look for problems where there aren't any.
The air left my lungs. He'd never brought up Terrence like that before. Never used my deepest wound as a weapon. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and said over his shoulder,
I love you. Stop creating drama. We've got a wedding to plan.
And just like that, I was the problem. That night, I called Raylene. I sat in my car in the driveway because I didn't want Vincent to hear me. I told her everything. The message, the unsaved number, Vincent's reaction, the way he threw Terrence in my face. Raylene listened quietly, then she sighed.
Okay, I hear you, Nisi. But honestly, that message could mean anything. And Vincent has a point. You do tend to spiral when you're stressed. Remember when Zora went to college and you were convinced something terrible was going to happen? You do this.
She paused, then her voice softened.
Look, I know Terrence messed you up, but Vincent is not Terrence. Don't project your past onto your present. That man loves you. I see it every time you two are together.
I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. So I dried my eyes, went back inside, and apologized to my husband for questioning him. He accepted my apology with a kiss on the forehead and said,
I forgive you. Just trust me, okay? I've never given you a reason not to.
I nodded, and I buried every doubt so deep I thought it would never surface again. A week later, I tried one more time. I called my father just to hear his voice. I didn't tell him about the message. I just said I was tired that wedding planning was stressful, that I missed Mama. Daddy listened the way he always did. Patient. Still. And then he said something that I didn't understand at the time.
If you ever need me, Nisi, I'm right here. No questions asked. You hear me? No questions.
I hear you, Daddy.
And Nisi,
Yes.
keep your eyes open even when it hurt.
I told him I loved him and hung up. I sat in the car for another 10 minutes staring at the house through the windshield, watching Vincent move through the kitchen window like everything was normal. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones and my teeth and the pit of my stomach, but I convinced myself it was just stress, just old wounds, just me being broken from the first time. I had no idea that the message on that iPad was just the tip of something so ugly, so calculated, so deliberately cruel that it would take my breath away when I finally saw the full picture. And I had no idea that the woman who just told me to stop spiraling was the same woman sending those messages. 4 months before Zora's wedding, the money started disappearing. I noticed it by accident. I was trying to transfer funds from our joint checking account into Zora's wedding savings, and the online portal kept declining the transaction. Insufficient funds. That couldn't be right. Vincent had deposited his share of the household income just 2 weeks ago. I'd seen the notification. I called the bank. After 20 minutes on hold and 3 rounds of identity verification, the representative told me the current balance of our joint checking account was $1,214. That's impossible, I said. There should be at least $12,000 in there. Ma'am, there have been several withdrawals over the past 60 days. Would you like me to read the transaction history? My hand was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Yes, please. 3 withdrawals. $5,000 on March 8th, $4,000 on March 22nd, and $3,000 on April 3rd. All cash, all from an ATM on Piedmont Road in Buckhead. $12,000 gone. When Vincent came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the bank statement printed out in front of me. No tears, no panic, just cold, numb clarity. Where's the money, Vincent? He set his briefcase down slowly, looked at the papers, looked at me, and then he did something that made my blood turn to ice. He smiled.
I invested it. There's a property deal in Midtown that's going to triple our return in 6 months. I was going to surprise you.
You took $12,000 without telling me.
I took $12,000 of our money and made a smart decision. That's what husbands do, Denise. They provide. They lead. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Since the last man in your life couldn't even stick around long enough to raise his own daughter.
The words hit me like a fist to the chest. I couldn't breathe. He'd done it again. Thrown Terrence at me like a grenade, and this time he'd dragged Zora into it too. But he wasn't finished.
You'd be nothing without me, Denise. I gave you a life people envy. So instead of interrogating me like I'm some kind of suspect, maybe you should say thank you.
He walked around the table, leaned down close to my ear, and said it like a blessing. He kissed the top of my head, picked up his briefcase, and walked upstairs like nothing had happened. I sat at that table for 2 hours. Didn't move, didn't eat, didn't cry. Something inside me was changing, hardening, and I couldn't tell yet if it was strength or if I was just going numb. Over the next few weeks, Vincent's behavior escalated. He started telling our friends that I was going through something. He said it with this concerned look on his face like a devoted husband worried about his struggling wife.
Denise has been really emotional lately.
He told our neighbors, Pam and Gerald, at a cookout.
I think the wedding stress is getting to her. I'm trying to be patient.
Pam looked at me with pity in her eyes. Gerald patted Vincent on the shoulder like he was some kind of saint. I stood there holding a plate of potato salad, smiling because what was I supposed to do? Make a scene, prove his point. That's the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't just twist your reality. It makes everyone else see a version of you that doesn't exist. And by the time you realize what's happening, the whole world is looking at you through his lens. Raylene was the worst. She started calling me every other day, not to check on me, but to manage me.
Nisi, you need to relax. Vincent told me you've been stressed. Maybe you should see someone, a therapist, just to talk things through.
I trusted her. Even then, even with everything falling apart, I trusted her. Because she was the one person who was supposed to be on my side no matter what. Meanwhile, Vincent started controlling the wedding budget. He demanded to approve every vendor payment. He cut the florist Zora wanted because it was too expensive and replaced it with a cheaper option without telling her. When Zora called me upset, I confronted Vincent. That's Zora's wedding. You don't get to make those decisions.
Someone has to be responsible with money around here since you clearly can't.
Zora started pulling away from me. Not dramatically, just slightly. She stopped calling every night. When I asked about wedding details, she gave short answers. One afternoon, Marcus let something slip during a phone call. Zora's just worried about you, Mama Carter. Vince told her you've been having a hard time and she doesn't want to add to your stress. My stomach dropped to the floor. Vincent had gone to my daughter. He'd told Zora I was unstable. He was building a wall between me and my own child brick by brick and using my love for her as the mortar. That same week, I found something else. I was looking for our homeowner's insurance policy in Vincent's filing cabinet in the garage. I didn't find the insurance policy. What I found instead was a life insurance document. My life insurance. The one I'd taken out years ago with Zora as the sole beneficiary. Except Zora's name was no longer on it. Vincent had changed the beneficiary to himself. The signature on the change form looked like mine, but I had never signed that document. I had never even seen it before. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I felt like the walls of the garage were closing in on me. The air was too thick, too hot. I couldn't swallow. He hadn't just been lying to me. He hadn't just been taking money. He'd forged my signature. He'd removed my daughter from my own life insurance policy and put himself in her place. What kind of man does that? I put the document back exactly where I found it. I closed the filing cabinet. I walked inside, washed my face, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. Thinner, darker circles under her eyes, a jawline clenched so tight it could crack a walnut. When did I become this person? I whispered. The mirror didn't answer, but somewhere deep in my gut, beneath the fear and the exhaustion and the shame, something else was waking up. Something sharp. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing at the edge of the worst discovery of my life. Everything before this, the messages, the missing money, the gaslighting, the isolation, all of it was just the surface. What I was about to uncover next would show me that the man sleeping in my bed and the woman I called my best friend had been plotting against me for longer than I ever imagined. And it would break me in a way I didn't think I could survive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 weeks before Zora's wedding, I drove to Vincent's office to surprise him with lunch. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were my half days at the non-profit, and I'd picked up his favorite jerk chicken and rice from that Jamaican spot on Memorial Drive. I was carrying the brown paper bag in one hand and my purse in the other, walking through the lobby of his building on Peachtree Street, thinking maybe this would be good for us. Maybe a small gesture could fix whatever was cracking between us. The receptionist wasn't at the front desk. The hallway was quiet. Vincent's office was at the end of the corridor past the conference room. The door was closed but not locked. I turned the handle slowly because I wanted to surprise him. What I saw instead surprised me. Vincent was standing behind his desk. Raylene was standing in front of him, her hands on his chest, her face tilted up toward his. They weren't just close. They were pressed together, foreheads touching his arms, wrapped around her waist like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. The brown paper bag hit the floor. Rice scattered across the hardwood. They both turned. Raylene's eyes went wide. She stepped back, smoothing her blouse, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across her face. But it disappeared fast, too fast, like she'd rehearsed this moment. Vincent didn't move. He stood there, hands still at his sides where Raylene's waist had been, and he looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was annoyance, like I was interrupting something.
Denise,
He said, his voice flat.
what are you doing here?
What am I doing here? My voice came out as a whisper. I couldn't make it louder. What is she doing here?
Nisi, it's not what you think. I came to talk to Vincent about the wedding seating chart. We were just talking.
Raylene opened her mouth, and what came out was the most calculated thing I'd ever heard another woman say. You were just talking with your hands on his chest, with your face an inch from his. Vincent sighed. He actually sighed like I was being exhausting.
Denise, sit down. Let me explain.
I don't want to sit down.
Fine.
He straightened his tie.
Raylene and I have been seeing each other. It's been about 2 years.
2 years. The room started spinning. I grabbed the door frame because my legs were giving out. 2 years. That meant it started in 2020, the year of the pandemic. The year I was homeschooling Zora over video calls, sanitizing groceries, losing my mind trying to keep the nonprofit running remotely while Vincent worked from home in the garage. He was with her. While I was drowning, he was with her. 2 years. I could barely form the words. You've been sleeping with my best friend for 2 years. Vincent leaned against his desk and crossed his arms. No flinch. No remorse. The mask was completely off now, and what was underneath was something cold and reptilian that I'd never seen before.
Your father's little empire, please. I'm the reason this family has any real status. The real estate contacts, the networking, the investments, none of that existed before me. And Raylene, she understands that. She doesn't nag, doesn't question, doesn't suffocate. She's everything you're not.
Every word was a blade, precise, deliberate, designed to gut me. I looked at Raylene, my best friend, the woman who held my hand when Terrence left, the woman who helped me pick out my wedding dress, the woman who sat across from me at Mama Jean's every other Wednesday and told me to trust my husband. She wouldn't look at me. She was staring at the floor, arms folded, her jaw tight, not with guilt, with impatience, like she was waiting for this scene to be over so she could go back to what she was doing. Raylene, I said. My voice cracked on her name. How could you?
Nisi, I'm sorry you're hurt, but you and I both know you weren't making him happy. Some women just aren't built for the kind of man Vincent is. I didn't plan this. It just happened.
She finally looked up, and what she said next is something I hear in my nightmares. It just happened. 2 years of lies, and that was her explanation. It just happened. I drove home blind with tears. I don't remember the road. I don't remember parking. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor with the door locked, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering in June. The tile was cold against my legs, and I pressed my palms flat against it, trying to feel something solid, because everything else in my world had just dissolved. That night, after Vincent didn't come home, I sat at his computer in the home office. I knew his email password because he'd given it to me years ago to print a document, and he'd never changed it. Careless. Or maybe he just didn't think I'd ever look. I looked. What I found nearly stopped my heart. Emails between Vincent and a divorce attorney named Bradley Haynes, dated as far back as 8 months ago. Vincent had been planning to file for divorce after Zora's wedding. The strategy was specific. Wait until the celebration is over, then file. Demand the Cascade Road house as marital property. Argue that he'd invested in improvements and maintenance. Seek 50% of all joint assets. There was a draft property settlement. In it, Vincent's attorney estimated the value of the Cascade Road house at $1.2 million, and Vincent was claiming half. My grandfather's house, the house Walter Carter built with his own hands. Vincent wanted to take it from us. And in one of the emails, a single line that made my blood freeze. Raylene will move in once the property transfer is finalized. She's agreed to cover renovations. They'd planned everything. The affair, the divorce, the theft of my home. And they were going to do it right after my daughter's wedding, using Zora's happiest day as a shield to keep me blind until the last possible second. Everything I believed was a lie. My marriage, my best friend, even the happy family that sat around my Thanksgiving table. All of it staged. All of it a performance designed to keep me quiet while they robbed me blind. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. The house was silent. The hallway clock ticked like a heartbeat, and somewhere inside me, the woman who had been crying and doubting and apologizing for months went very, very quiet. Not sad quiet, something else. But what I didn't know yet was that someone else had been watching all of this unfold. Someone patient, someone meticulous, someone who loved me more than I had ever understood. And he'd been building a case long before I ever found that first receipt in Vincent's coat pocket. I'll get to that part, but first I need to tell you about the moment I hit the absolute bottom. Because you can't understand how I rose if you don't understand how far I fell. The bottom came 3 days later on a Sunday morning. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I'd been calling in sick to work something I'd never done in 11 years. I was lying on the couch in the living room at 6 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes I'd had on since Thursday when my phone rang. It was Zora.
Mama, are you coming to the dress fitting today? Raylene's already here. She picked out the most beautiful veil. She said she wants to help me with my hair too. Mama, she's been so amazing through all of this.
Every word was a knife. Raylene was at my daughter's dress fitting. Raylene was choosing my daughter's veil. Raylene was playing the role that belonged to me while I was decomposing on my own couch. "I'll be there, baby. Give me an hour," I whispered. I drove to the bridal boutique in Buckhead in a fog. When I walked in, I saw them. Zora in a white gown spinning in front of the mirror. Raylene standing behind her, adjusting the train, laughing her hand on Zora's shoulder, like she had every right to be there.
If you ever need anything on your big day, I'm right here. Always, like a bonus mom.
Raylene said to Zora, loud enough for me to hear as I approached. Like a bonus mom. The floor shifted beneath me. I gripped a rack of dresses to keep from stumbling. Raylene turned and saw me. She smiled. That same warm, sisterly smile she'd been wearing for 15 years. The smile that hid everything.
Nisi, there you are. We were just talking about you. Come look at your beautiful daughter.
I looked at Zora. She was glowing. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would not ruin this for her. Whatever was happening between me, Vincent, and Raylene, my daughter's joy was sacred. I would protect it with my last breath. So I smiled. I told Zora she looked like an angel. I held her hand while the seamstress pinned the hem, and I stood 3 feet away from the woman who was destroying my life and pretended everything was fine. That night, Vincent came home late. I was in bed with the lights off, but I was wide awake. He didn't check on me. He went straight to the guest bathroom, showered, and climbed into bed smelling like a cologne I didn't recognize. I lay there in the dark and said, "I want a divorce, Vincent."
No, you don't.
Silence, then he laughed. A short, ugly laugh. "I know about you and Raylene. I know about the lawyer. I know about the emails. I want a divorce." The mattress shifted. He sat up and I could feel him looking at me in the darkness.
Listen to me carefully, Denise. You're not going to divorce me. You're going to smile at that wedding play, The Happy Wife, and let me handle the rest. Because if you don't, I will go to Zora and tell her you had a mental breakdown. I'll tell her you've been paranoid delusional, making accusations with no proof. I'll tell Marcus's family that the bride's mother is unstable. Who do you think they'll believe, me, the man who's been covering for your erratic behavior for months, or the woman everybody already thinks is falling apart?
His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He'd spent months building that narrative. The concerned husband, the patient partner, every comment to friends, every whisper to Zora, every suggestion that I was emotional and stressed, it was all preparation. He'd constructed a cage around me using my own reputation as the bars.
Who's going to want a 44-year-old woman with baggage, Denise? Be realistic. 2 husbands who couldn't stand you. At some point, you got to ask yourself, maybe the problem is you.
Then he leaned closer. So close I could feel his breath on my ear. He lay back down, rolled over, and was asleep within minutes. I lay there until dawn, watching the ceiling turn from black to gray to pale gold. His words played on a loop in my head. 2 husbands who couldn't stand you. Maybe the problem is you. Who's going to want you? At 6:30 in the morning, I got in my car and drove to my father's house in College Park. I didn't call ahead. I just drove. When Daddy opened the door, he took one look at my face, stepped aside, and said nothing. He didn't need to. He led me to the kitchen, sat me down at the table, poured me a cup of coffee, and waited. I told him everything. The affair, Raylene, the emails, The divorce plan, the missing money, the forged signature on my life insurance, the threat Vincent made in the dark. I told him all of it, and by the end I was sobbing so hard I couldn't see straight, my face pressed into my hands, my whole body shaking. When I finally looked up, my father wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He was sitting across from me with his hands folded on the table, and his eyes were the steadiest I'd ever seen them. Like bedrock. Like something that had been waiting a very long time for this exact conversation.
Denise, I need to show you something.
He said quietly. He stood up, slowly walked to the hallway closet, and came back with a manila folder. It was thick, 2 inches thick. He set it on the table in front of me and opened it. Inside were photographs. Dates, timestamps, locations. Vincent and Raylene at a hotel in Midtown. Vincent and Raylene at a restaurant in Savannah. Vincent leaving Raylene's apartment in Buckhead at 11 at night. The earliest photo was dated March of 2020. You knew, I whispered.
I've known since year 3 of your marriage. I hired a private investigator after I noticed irregularities in the property tax filings on the Cascade Road house. Vincent was trying to get his name added to the deed. He failed because the house was never yours to transfer. It's in an irrevocable trust has been since 2014. I set it up before you married him. The trust names you and Zora as beneficiaries. Vincent has no legal claim to that property. None.
I stared at him. My father, this quiet, sweet tea drinking man who sat on porches and told stories about Mama, had been running a counter operation against my husband for 5 years. Why didn't you tell me?
Because you loved him, baby girl, and I couldn't take that from you. You had to see it for yourself, but I promised your mother I would never let anyone take what belongs to this family, and I keep my promises.
His eyes softened. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine.
Now, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to strike yet. We're going to let that man walk into Zora's wedding thinking he's untouchable, and when he makes his move, and he will make a move because men like him can't help themselves, we're going to be ready.
Something inside me shifted. The tears stopped. My breathing steadied. And for the first time in months, the fog lifted. Not sad quiet, dangerous quiet. I want attorney Vivian Okafor. I've heard she doesn't lose.
Already retained her. She's been waiting for your call.
My father smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from him in years. The next 4 weeks were the greatest performance of my life. I woke up every morning, made coffee, kissed Vincent on the cheek, and smiled like a woman who didn't know her entire world was built on quicksand. I laughed at his jokes. I ironed his shirts. I sat across from him at dinner and asked about his day while the manila folder sat locked in the trunk of my car, growing thicker by the week. Vincent noticed the change. Of course he did. He thought he'd won.
See,
He said one evening, rubbing my shoulders while I stood at the kitchen counter.
this is what happens when you stop overthinking. We're good, Denise. We've always been good.
I leaned back into his hands and said, "You're right. I don't know what I was thinking." He kissed my temple. I smiled. Let him enjoy his last few days of feeling powerful. Behind the curtain, everything was moving. Attorney Vivian Okafor was a force of nature. 5 feet 4 inches of precision wrapped in Chanel suits and reading glasses. She specialized in divorce litigation with a focus on financial fraud. And when my father showed her the evidence, she looked at him over the rim of her glasses and said, "Mr. Carter, your son-in-law is not a smart man." Vivian laid out the legal strategy piece by piece. The forged signature on my life insurance beneficiary change was a felony forgery in the first degree under Georgia law. The unauthorized withdrawals from our joint account, while harder to prosecute, criminally provided grounds for a fault-based divorce with full financial restitution. And the irrevocable trust meant that Vincent's dream of claiming the Cascade Road house was legally impossible. He could file every motion in the world. That house would never be his. The trust was established before the marriage. Vivian explained, spreading documents across her conference table. It's not marital property. It never was. Whatever his attorney told him, they either didn't do their due diligence or they lied to keep billing hours. Either way, Vincent Delaney has no claim. I met with Vivian 3 times over those 4 weeks, always during my lunch break, always at her office on Marietta Street downtown. I told Vincent I was visiting a new vendor for the nonprofit. He never questioned it. Why would he? In his mind, I was back to being the obedient wife. My father handled the other preparations. He quietly invited a few specific guests to Zora's wedding, people Vincent didn't know about. A journalist friend from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who covered business fraud. 2 of Vincent's potential business partners who'd been considering a joint development deal with him, and Vivian Okafor herself, who would attend as Hector's +1, carrying a briefcase that held divorce papers, a criminal complaint for forgery, and a notarized copy of the Irrevocable Trust. But there was one thing I had to do alone, the hardest thing. I sat Zora down on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks before the wedding. Marcus was working late. Vincent was at what he called a client dinner, which I now knew meant Raylene's apartment. It was just me and my daughter at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd confronted Vincent about the missing money, the same table where he'd told me I was nothing without him.
Mama, what's wrong?
Zora asked, reading my face immediately. She always could. I told her. Not everything. Not the ugliest details. But enough. I told her that Vincent had been unfaithful, that Raylene was involved, that I had evidence, that I was filing for divorce, and that I had a plan, but I needed her to trust me. Zora didn't cry. She sat very still, her hands flat on the table, and I watched something shift behind her eyes. The same shift I'd felt in my father's kitchen, the Carter steal.
How long?
She asked. At least 2 years.
Raylene?
Yes. Zora closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were dry and hard.
I want them both gone, Mama.
They will be, but I need you to do something difficult. I need you to act normal at the wedding. Can you do that?
Can I do that?
She almost smiled.
Mama, I'm your daughter. I've been watching you hold it together my whole life. I learned from the best.
That night, I held my child and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday evening at a restaurant in Virginia Highland. 40 people, candles on every table, jazz quartet in the corner. It should have been magical. Vincent made sure it was his show. He stood up to give a toast, and what came out of his mouth was a masterpiece of narcissism disguised as generosity.
I just want to say,
He began, holding his glass high,
that this family wouldn't be where it is without the work I've put in over the past 8 years. When I came into Denise's life, things were falling apart, and I rebuilt them. So tonight I raise my glass not just to Zora and Marcus, but to the foundation I've built for all of us.
The room applauded. People nodded. Gerald from next door said, "That's a real man right there." I clapped along. My father, sitting at the end of the table, tapped his glass politely. His face revealed nothing. But under the table, my phone buzzed. A text from Vivian Okafor. "Everything is ready. Enjoy tomorrow."
See how they look at me? They respect me, Denise. This is what I brought to your family.
Vincent leaned over and whispered in my ear. I looked into his eyes and said, "You're absolutely right, Vincent. You've given us more than you'll ever know." He winked at me. Across the table, Raylene caught his eye and smiled. Somewhere between the jazz quartet and dessert, I excused myself to the restroom. I locked the door, leaned against the sink, and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd whispered, "When did I become this person 2 months ago?" This woman had fire in her eyes. This woman had a plan. Tomorrow, Vincent would make his grand gesture. My father's investigator had intercepted messages between Vincent and Raylene confirming it. Vincent planned to announce their relationship publicly at the reception, demand a divorce in front of everyone, and leave with Raylene turning Zora's wedding into his personal stage. He thought he was writing the ending to this story. He had no idea that the ending had already been written by a 72-year-old man with a manila folder, a daughter with nothing left to lose, and a lawyer who hadn't lost a case in 14 years. Tomorrow was going to be the most important day of my life. Not because my daughter was getting married, but because the man who tried to take everything from me was about to find out what it feels like to lose it all. I dried my hands, fixed my lipstick, and walked back to the table. Vincent smiled at me. I smiled back. One more night. The wedding was beautiful. I need to say that first because my daughter deserved that truth. Zora walked down the aisle at Foxhall Resort in a white strapless gown with a cathedral train, her braids pinned up with baby's breath woven through them, and she looked like everything good I'd ever done in my life, wrapped into one person. Marcus cried when he saw her. His mother cried. I cried. Even my father, sitting in the front row with his cane resting against his knee, pressed his handkerchief to his eyes. The ceremony was perfect. The vows were tender. The kiss was sweet. And for 45 minutes, I forgot about everything else and just watched my baby girl become someone's wife. Then the reception began, and the clock started ticking. Dinner was served in the grand ballroom, 200 guests at round tables draped in ivory linen gold candelabras, string lights crisscrossing the ceiling like a net of stars. The DJ played Stevie Wonder. People danced. People laughed. The champagne was flowing, and the room was warm with love. Vincent was in his element. Charcoal suit, pocket square cufflinks that caught the light every time he moved his hands. He worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, telling jokes, accepting compliments like they were currency. Raylene was seated at the wedding party table in a burgundy gown, her hair swept to one side, smiling at everyone like she belonged there, like she'd earned her place. I sat next to my father. He hadn't said a word in over an hour. His hand rested on the table near his water glass, steady as stone. Vivian Okafor was seated 2 tables away, her briefcase tucked beneath her chair. At 8:47 in the evening, right after the father-daughter dance, right after Marcus and Zora cut the cake, right when the room was swelling with joy, Vincent stood up. He picked up a microphone from the DJ's table. The room quieted. People smiled, expecting a toast. Zora looked at me from across the room. I gave her the smallest nod.
I want to say something.
Vincent began, his voice smooth and confident.
This has been a beautiful day, a day about love, about honesty, about having the courage to follow your heart.
He paused, smiled, looked directly at me.
And in the spirit of honesty, I have an announcement of my own.
He reached down and took Raylene's hand. She stood up beside him, her chin lifted, her eyes bright with victory.
Raylene and I are in love. We've been together for 2 years. Denise, I'm sorry, but I want a divorce. I deserve to be happy. And Raylene is my happiness.
The room froze. 200 people turned to stone. Someone dropped a fork and the clatter echoed like a gunshot. Zora's bridesmaids covered their mouths. Marcus put his arm around Zora. The DJ cut the music. Vincent stood there holding Raylene's hand, his chest puffed out, his jaw set, waiting for the chaos, waiting for me to crumble. I didn't, because my father was already standing.
Well, Vincent, since you've chosen to make this a public affair, I think these good people deserve the full picture.
Hector Beaumont Carter rose from his chair slowly, deliberately, the way a man rises when he has all the time in the world and knows exactly what he's about to do. He buttoned his suit jacket with one hand, picked up his cane with the other, and walked to the front of the room. Every step was measured. Every eye followed him. Vincent's smile flickered, just barely, a candle in a sudden draft.
This is a report from a licensed private investigator I retained in 2020. It documents your affair with Raylene Foster, including dates, photographs, and hotel receipts, but that's not the interesting part.
My father reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a folded document. He unfolded it with the patience of a man opening a letter he'd waited years to read.
This is a copy of a life insurance beneficiary change form bearing my daughter's forged signature. Right, you changed her beneficiary from her daughter to yourself. That's forgery in the first degree. A felony in the state of Georgia.
The color drained from Vincent's face, not slowly, all at once like someone pulled a plug. His hand released Raylene's.
This is a record of $12,000 you withdrew from the joint account without my daughter's knowledge or consent, and this...
He held up a fourth document.
...is the deed of trust for the house on Cascade Road. An irrevocable trust established in 2014, 2 years before you married my daughter. The beneficiaries are Denise Lorraine Carter and Zora Elise Carter. Your name appears nowhere. You have no legal claim to that property. You never did.
Vincent's hands started trembling. The microphone in his grip shook so badly the speakers hummed with feedback. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His lips moved, but nothing came out.
And as for you, Miss Foster, I thought you should know something about the woman you've been conspiring with.
My father turned to Raylene. His voice didn't waver. He nodded to Vivian. She opened her briefcase and handed him one final folder.
My investigator found these messages on a cloud backup associated with your phone number. They're between you and a man named Terrence Whitfield in Savannah.
Raylene's face went white.
In these messages, you describe Vincent as, and I quote, useful but temporary. You told Mr. Whitfield that once Vincent secured the house, you planned to, quote, take what we need and disappear. You were never going to stay with him, Raylene. You were running the same game on him that he was running on my daughter.
Vincent turned to Raylene. His voice cracked like dry wood.
What is he talking about, Raylene? Raylene, look at me.
But Raylene wasn't looking at anyone. She was already moving. She grabbed her clutch from the table, knocked over a champagne glass, and walked fast toward the exit. Her heels clicked against the ballroom floor in the dead silence. She didn't look back. Not once. Vincent watched her go. His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the nearest table to keep from falling rattling glasses and silverware. 200 people watched a man dissolve in real time.
Denise?
He whispered, turning to me. His eyes were red, wet, desperate.
Please, I made a mistake. I'll change. I swear to God I'll change. Please don't do this.
I stood up, smoothed my dress, walked to him slowly the same way my father had. I stopped close enough to see the sweat running down his temple, to hear his ragged breathing, to watch his hands shake the way mine had shaken for months. You said I'd be nothing without you. Look around this room, Vincent. Look at who's standing, and look at who's falling apart. My voice was level, clear, steady as my father's. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. You said no one would want a 44-year-old woman with baggage. But here I am, surrounded by 200 people who love me. And here you are with no wife, no house, no money, and the woman you threw everything away for just walked out without looking back. Vivian Okafor stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope in Vincent's trembling hand. Divorce papers and a criminal complaint for forgery already filed with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. I suggest you find an attorney, a real one this time. She said crisply. Vincent stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. His legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, the same chair where Raylene had been sitting minutes ago, now empty. His head dropped into his hands. His shoulders heaved. The microphone dangled from his fingers, broadcasting every broken breath to 200 silent witnesses. I turned away from him, walked back to my daughter. Zora was standing with Marcus, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But when she saw me coming, she opened her arms.
Mama, I'm so proud of you.
She whispered into my shoulder. I held my daughter. I looked over her shoulder at my father, who was standing exactly where he'd been, cane in hand, handkerchief back in his pocket, watching me with the quietest, deepest pride a father's eyes can hold. Then I said to the DJ, "Play the music. My daughter's still getting married tonight." The room erupted, not in chaos, in applause. The kind that starts slow and builds like a wave, rolling through the tables, rising from the chairs, filling the ballroom until the chandeliers trembled. Vincent Delaney sat alone at an empty table, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he'd tried to steal, while 200 people celebrated the women he'd underestimated. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in my childhood bedroom at the Cascade Road house. Zora and Marcus had left for their honeymoon in Montego Bay the night before, glowing, dancing their way to the car, while the remaining guests threw rose petals and cheered. The wedding had gone on for 3 more hours after Vincent's collapse. People danced harder, laughed louder, held each other tighter like they were celebrating not just a marriage, but a liberation. Vincent left the reception alone. No one offered him a ride. No one shook his hand. No one even looked at him as he walked through the parking lot in his charcoal suit, the same suit he'd worn like armor, now wrinkled and damp with sweat. The last image I had of him was through the ballroom window, a man standing under a streetlight patting his pockets for car keys he couldn't find because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't feel joy watching him leave. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter than that. Relief. The kind that settles into your bones after you've been holding your breath for years and finally let it go. That Sunday morning, I made coffee in Mama's old kitchen. The sunlight came through the window above the sink the same way it had when I was a little girl, warm and golden, landing on the counter in a rectangle of light that I used to put my hand in just to feel the warmth. I put my hand in it again. It felt the same. Some things don't change, and I was grateful for that. Daddy came over at 9. He let himself in with his key, hung his hat on the hook by the door, and sat down at the kitchen table without a word. I poured him coffee. Black, no sugar, same as always. We sat across from each other in comfortable silence for a long time.
Your mom would be so proud of you, Nisi.
He finally said. I reached across the table and took his hand. She'd be proud of both of us, Daddy. He squeezed my fingers once, then picked up his coffee and looked out the window at the magnolia tree Grandpa Walter had planted in 1967. It was still there, still blooming. Some things are built to last. The legal aftermath moved swiftly. Vivian Okafor was as relentless in court as she was at that reception. The divorce was finalized in 4 months record speed for Fulton County. The judge, after reviewing the evidence of financial fraud, forgery, and infidelity, awarded me full ownership of all joint assets. Vincent's claim to the Cascade Road house was denied before his attorney even finished the argument. The irrevocable trust was airtight. My father had made sure of that a decade ago. Vincent was charged with forgery in the first degree for the life insurance document. He pled down to a lesser charge to avoid trial, but the conviction went on his record. His real estate license was suspended pending a review board hearing. His business partners, 2 of whom had been sitting in that ballroom when my father stood up, pulled out of every pending deal. Within 3 months, Vincent Delaney's firm was dissolved. His office on Peachtree Street was vacated. The nameplate was removed from the door. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved into a studio apartment in Morrow, south of the city. No furniture except a mattress and a folding table. His mother stopped returning his calls after the story made the rounds in their family. His brother told someone at a barber shop that he was ashamed to share the Delaney name. The man who told me he gave this family its status was now living in a 400-square-foot apartment with nothing but his name, and even that had lost its value. As for Raylene, her ending was almost poetic. Terrence Whitfield, the man in Savannah she'd been planning to run away with, discovered through mutual connections what she'd done to me. He cut her off completely, blocked her number, changed his locks. Raylene lost her job at the marketing firm in Buckhead after a colleague, someone who'd been at the wedding, shared what happened. She tried reaching out to old friends. No one answered. The woman who'd spent 15 years embedded in my life like family was now a stranger to everyone who'd ever known her. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't celebrate Vincent's either. There's a difference between justice and revenge, and I wanted to stay on the right side of that line. But I won't lie to you. When I drove past that studio apartment in Morrow one afternoon on my way to visit a nonprofit partner in Clayton County, I slowed down just for a second, just long enough to see the window with no curtains, the parking lot with no car, and the mailbox overflowing with what I could only assume were bills and legal notices. And I thought about what he said to me in the dark that night. Who's going to want a 44-year-old woman with baggage? I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. 44, strong, free, driving my own car to my own job, going home to my own house that no one could ever take from me. I smiled and kept driving. The months that followed were about rebuilding not from wreckage, but from truth. I expanded the Youth Initiative's programming, secured a grant from the City of Atlanta for a new mentorship track for young women aging out of foster care. I threw myself into work not to escape the pain, but because the pain had burned away everything that wasn't essential, and what was left was purpose. Zora and Marcus settled into a townhouse in Decatur. They came for Sunday dinner every week without fail. Marcus learned how to make Daddy's sweet tea exactly the way he liked it, and Daddy pretended to be impressed every time like it was the first time. Those Sundays healed me in ways no therapist ever could. One evening, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting on the front porch of the Cascade Road house, the same porch where Daddy used to watch Zora ride her bike, the same porch where he told me to keep my eyes open even when it hurts. The sun was setting behind the magnolia tree, and the sky was that deep orange that only Atlanta gives you in late autumn, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something stronger than pain. The knowledge that I had walked through fire and come out the other side, still standing still, breathing still me. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 44 years old. I am a mother, a daughter, a leader. And I am nobody's fool. Not anymore. Not ever again. If you're listening to this and you recognize any part of my story in your own life, the man who isolates you, the friend who keeps you blind, the voice in your head that says, "You're not enough," I need you to hear me. You are enough. You have always been enough. And the people who try to convince you otherwise are only doing it because your strength terrifies them. Don't wait for someone to save you. Save yourself. And if you're blessed enough to have a father, a mother, a sister, a friend, anyone who loves you enough to stand up when it matters, let them. You don't have to fight alone, but you do have to fight. The morning air felt different when I walked out of that courthouse for the last time. Lighter, cleaner, like the world had finally exhaled. And so had I. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment and tell me about a time you found the courage to walk away from someone who didn't deserve you. Your story might be the thing that gives another woman the strength to take that first step. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, because every story we share here is a reminder that we are stronger than the lies people tell us about ourselves. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become. And that is everything.